Get ready before life happens. The podcast helping you navigate life's what ifs.
Recognizing financial abuse is the first step, and we covered that in the first part of this two-part special episode with Joy Slabaugh. The second part, which we're going to talk about, is knowing how to respond, and knowing how to respond can change someone's life. Welcome back to this special two-part episode of Get Ready Before Life Happens. I'm again joined by Joy Slabaugh to continue this conversation. Joy, welcome back.
Tony, so great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, just in case someone missed the first part of the conversation, could you share a brief overview of your origin story again?
Sure. So I was raised in a cult that used money to control people. And it really gave me, and spoiler alert, I did not have access to money when I was young through this cult, but I got really curious about money and its association with power. And so in getting out of the cult, when I became an adult, I was like, how can I get access to money and power? I got into the financial planning industry and was really curious how, as I succeeded in my career, I worked with very wealthy individuals and 9 and 10 and 11 figure clients. I saw the way money and power are tied so closely, and also the way money can be used to help or to harm. Eventually, I made a career change to become a therapist where I work with survivors of domestic violence and sexual abuse. And I realized I was still talking about money. And so this thread of money and power has been woven throughout my whole career. And today I've evolved my career. I combine my two careers. I work at the intersection of money and emotions. I help advisors and high net worth individuals transform how they engage with money, shifting it from one of stress and isolation to a source of connection, impact, and lasting fulfillment.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for being here. And I appreciate you being open to sharing your story, is I think that really helps people. So, before we jump into the second part of the conversation, can you just give us a brief overview again of what financial abuse is?
Absolutely. So financial abuse can cover a wide type of behaviors, but if you're going to sum it down into a nice little tidbit, it's when an individual controls another person's ability to acquire, use, or maintain economic resources. Often there's coercion involved, but there's this aspect that they're trying to control somebody, and they use money or economic resources to do that, money being a big piece of that.
Definitely. And it can come in a whole wide spectrum. So I'd recommend everybody go and listen to part one of this conversation to get a better shape of what financial abuse is and how it covers a really wide spectrum. And it's not always what you think it is. And as you pointed out in the first episode, Joy, is that the numbers are shocking that what is it, 1 in 5 women and 1 in 7 men will experience some form of financial abuse at some time in their life.
Yes, and currently people report that 14% of people report in a current relationship they're experiencing financial abuse. 22% report in a past relationship they experience financial abuse. So a lot of your clients have probably experienced at some point, and a shocking amount are probably currently experiencing it in some form.
Definitely, definitely. So, let's jump in. So, now that we've framed what financial abuse is, what happens when an advisor suspects financial abuse? What's the first thing they should do?
So I would really encourage folks to get curious. So one thing that's really important is um, it's important to let your client use their words to describe what's happening to them. Introducing the term financial abuse may not be something they are ready to hear or able to hear. And so that can be, so I really encourage folks to lead with curiosity. So for example, if you're working with a couple and you're getting to suspect, like, whoa, is there maybe a power imbalance that's going on here? Does this person really have a full say in what's happening? See if you can invite them to meet with you separately, where they can talk more openly or more freely, and where you can bring that curiosity and ask questions to understand more. One of the hallmarks of abuse in relationships is trying to isolate people and isolate them from other resources, from other individuals. And so it may be difficult, right? If the other partner is actually being abusive, they may be reluctant to allow you to meet with the partner without them. Notice that. Notice that that's a thing that's happening. That may be another tick mark in the box of, could this be abuse that's happening? But if you're able to, and I would say, like, if you are suspecting it in a couple situation, it's really important that the person you suspect who's being abused, that you do not ask these questions in front of the person that you suspect is an abuser, because they can use that, the abuser can use that against the person they're abusing later. And they may even try to isolate them from you and further prevent them having access, that person to having access to you. And whereas otherwise you can be a resource, someone who's helping them get out of the situation. If the abuser suspects that you're on to them, then they may cut off that avenue for the person who's being abused.
Yeah, I think that's such a valuable point is that you have to remember that it's not the meeting in isolation that the victim and the abuser are going to still be together, and that untangling from abuse is a long-term process where somebody has to be in the right frame of mind to escape from the abuse. I guess I don't know if that's the best word to use, but that it's not something automatic, and you don't want to just immediately get them into another room and say, "Hey, you're a victim of financial abuse." You have to be very compassionate and as you point out, to tell their story. So
Mhm.
that's really important.
And one thing that I'll offer to folks is, it's a best practice to make it a habit of occasionally having individual meetings with members of a couple, that they don't always doesn't always have to be both of them, especially if you notice there's a power imbalance between them. It can be really valuable to have individual meetings. Now, this can serve you in a lot of ways. That one, you're going to get a lot more information talking to people individually than together when there's a big power imbalance. But two, if you're trying to help protect yourself from getting pulled into unwittingly enacting abuse on someone, that's a really great way to do that, to protect yourself, is make it a firm policy. And that way, when you're meeting with a couple and you're noticing some dynamics, you can say, like, hey, just a reminder, like, our policy is that we're going to periodically meet with each of you individually. Well, and you can say, we really want to make sure each of you feels heard and gets our full attention devoted to you, right? Want to give you both that opportunity. And then you can have, that way you get meetings with each of them individually, and there's the questions you can ask the person that you suspect might be being abused.
That's a great tip. And then it's a great practice because it's not something that's gonna throw up anybody's hackles. They won't go, "Oh, something's going on," because people are
Right.
sensitive to those changes in rhythm and patterns.
Yeah.
So, as part of this, how do professionals avoid unintentionally escalating risk when abuse is present?
Yeah. So I'm going to give like two parts to that answer. The one I want to share, and I don't think I mentioned this in the last episode, but is, abuse can be really gnarly to spot. And what I mean by that is that people who are currently in abusive situations, excuse me, many times it's hard to name, right? Because it's not as clear cut as, oh, well, they did this and this and this and this and this. They also, in all likelihood, did all these wonderful things too. And so it's really hard to recognize that, oh, abuse is happening. And so one of the things to answer the direct piece of your question, is you want to be really careful about throwing around terms like abuse. And even if you're just being with with the person that you suspect is being abused, that can be um that can actually alienate them from you. And so I actually encourage you, like, not to use the term financial abuse with your clients. If you're going to chat with someone that you suspect might be being abused, you can ask them about the tenets of abuse without actually using that term, because there's a lot of charge around that. And you can imagine that if I were to say to you, like, well, Tony, I'm concerned you might be being financially abused, you might feel shame. What do you mean? I'm a financial planner. How could I be abused? Right? Like I have all this knowledge. It can bring up so much shame and really big emotions that it can be make it easier for someone to like reject the messenger, if you will. So don't use terms like abuse. Instead, you can ask people these questions about types of, do you feel like you have access to money when you need it? Do you feel, how much agency do you feel around your finances? And I've got more questions I can share as well. But that would be the number one thing I would say is don't use the term financial abuse with your clients. And then the second thing is if you suspect that there's financial abuse with a couple that you're working with, you do not want to, or you want to be really careful about inviting emotional vulnerability. That's actually dangerous for the person who's being abused. There's research that shows, okay, let me back up a second. So when financial abuse is happening, many times other forms of abuse are also happening, being it emotional, be it sexual, be it physical. You may never know about those. And when there is violence in a relationship, there's research that shows couples therapy is actually harmful because what it does is it opens up, there's emotional vulnerability in couples therapy, and that becomes then information that the abuser can wield against their victim. And so while you're not doing couples therapy, there's a lot of intimacy that happens in the financial planning process, right? There's emotional vulnerability. And so if you suspect that with a couple, then you want to be really cautious about inviting emotional vulnerability in that space. And I would encourage you to like try not to do that. And this is again where separate meetings can be really not just helpful, but can help someone be safe and stay safe because they're not being asked to reveal information that could be used to harm them.
Yeah, I think that's really important for people to understand is that when there is actual abuse is a specialist is needed. It's
Yeah,
not something that you can jump into and that, don't be scared to observe and try to help, but recognize that you want to make sure that you're not making the situation worse, that you understand.
great.
So that leads into the next question. What is the advisor's role in
Okay.
this?
Yeah, so I think there's two things. One is you can help someone get access to resources, like supportive resources. Actually, there's three things. You can help them get access to supportive resources. Secondly, you can be an anchor in the storm, if you will. You can be a safe person for them. And the third thing is you can skillfully use questions to help them recognize whether or not they're being abused. And again, we're not going to use the abuse word with them, but that's an important piece of it. So let me take these down one at a time. So the first one, and hopefully you're taking notes, Tony, because I didn't write this down.
Mhm.
I want to make sure I don't forget.
Well, it's being recorded, so.
That's true. But so I don't forget my point is what I'm saying. Um, so the first piece is, I'm just going to take the second one first, about being an anchor in the storm. Again, one of the ways abusers are effective is they cut people off. That the only human they really have access to is the abuser. Well, is you got to go through the abuser for everything. You can never leave. You're trapped. You're stuck. You can be a safe person. Right? If their name is on some account, you have to talk to them periodically. And so that gives them a reason to leave wherever they are, to come into your office, to engage with you. And you can be a safe person. So that's one thing you can do. Second thing you can do is help them. Actually, I'm going to put in the order it makes sense, right? So be a safe person. Then you can help them explore what impacts they're having to them, right? Like it's not our place to say, oh, well, you're being abused and you need to leave. You do not want to tell someone to leave. You don't know their reality. And frankly, the most dangerous time for someone for someone in an abusive situation is when they leave. That's when the majority of homicides happen. So like it is not your place to tell someone to leave. But what you can do is ask questions. right? And so some of the questions, you want to share the questions now or later? Because I know you've got a list of.
Yeah, let's do it right now.
Okay. So first is get permission to ask questions, right? And one way you can do that is like, look, I see my job as helping you put your money to work for you. So I really like to understand the ways that money is or is not working for you right now. Is it okay if I ask you some deeper questions around that? Really important you have permission to ask questions. Otherwise, they may just be defensive and give, monosyllabic answers. They might not be honest with you. They might try to deflect. So once you have permission to ask questions, then you can ask them stuff like, how confident do you feel in your ability to access money when you need it? And you'll notice this is an important thing to ask, frankly, all of your clients, not just the ones you suspect are being abused. Because if they don't feel like they can access it easily, well, there's a low-hanging fruit how you can make their life easier and help them access their money more easily, right? Other questions you can have is like, hey, the arrangement that you and your partner have with your finances, how does it benefit you? How does it benefit your partner? And you could start to get a sense of, because there may be times where it looks unequal to you, but maybe it is equal in ways that were not immediately visible to you, right? So will help you. But also, if it's not actually balanced, it's a way you're asking things that are now in the known space that we could talk about. You can also ask, like, this arrangement that you and your partner have around finances, where is it hard for you? Where is it hard for your partner? Again, this is helpful in the abuse conversation, also really helpful in you finding ways to bring great value to them and make their lives easier. So there's like a lot of wins for you by going down this questioning path. And then another question I'd encourage you to ask is, if you had a magic wand and you could change anything about your finances, I'm sorry, you can change anything about how finances are managed in your household, what would you want to change? And giving that, like, inviting magical thinking is what allows people to say that thing that they really wish for, that maybe they don't think is possible, but they really wish could be true. And these questions can help you understand if there's power imbalances, can help you understand if there's ways to serve your clients even better, right, to make their lives easier. And also, these questions are giving somebody an opportunity to share, if they want, the ways they're being impacted by what might be happening. And this is also what is helping you feel like a safe person to them, right? Because you're giving space for them to ask these questions, and you're hearing it and you're holding it. And I think, it's really important that you keep their confidence. If they tell you, I'm concerned that, I don't have access to my money. I don't feel like I can. I don't feel like I can talk about this with my partner. Well, it's really important you don't share that with their partner that you now suspect might be abusing them, right? And so that's how you maintain you being a safe person. And then the third thing you can do is help them access resources. So I highly recommend that advisors do a Google search and find out the resources for abuse in your area. I guarantee you there are multiple nonprofits that focus on helping people locally, and that there are resources. And you be very wise to familiarize yourself with the groups that are available, the agencies that are available, and the resources that are available. So that should, when your clients need more resources, you can help them. And these resources, I think it could be anything from just like finding a group of people to talk to who are also in a similar situation, to it could be helping them find housing solutions if they need to leave, right? Well, you can also help with that because you have access to the money, right? So you can be a really big help, because like when people are in abusive situations and they don't leave, 99% of the time it's for financial reasons. So you being the advisor, you're in a position of tremendous power where you can help them figure out how to access their resources so that they can get the help they need, get to safety. Yeah, and you understand the way financial systems work way better than your clients do, and you can help them navigate this. So these are some of the things that you can do to support your clients when you're suspecting abuse.
That that's a great list. And, thanks for sharing the questions. And I think I want to iterate something that you said is that it is important to realize is that there are dimensions beyond the financial abuse oftentimes. So you do want to take care in how you address this, and that if you feel like you're out of your comfort zone, if you work for a large organization, then there's probably somebody within your organization who can help you find the resources.
Mhm.
If you're a solo practitioner or a financial coach, like you said, Joy, is there are nonprofits all around the world
Mhm.
that will help people out in abusive relationships.
Mhm.
If there's elder financial abuse, every county, at least in California,
Mhm.
has an agency that can help with elder financial abuse or just
Mhm.
elder abuse in general. And
Mhm.
so that, as you point out, is to do what you can, but don't exceed your own personal comfort level,
Mhm.
and don't endanger somebody, by acting, I guess, rashly, because if it dawns on you and you're sitting right now listening to this podcast episode and you go, boy, right now I'm thinking of the Smiths, and
Mhm.
boy, I think Mrs. Smith is a victim of financial abuse. Take a moment to center yourself
Yeah.
before jumping in and deciding on, how you can be a resource.
That is
So
such a good point, Tony, and I'm really glad you raised that because another thing that's really important to understand when you're working with folks who are experiencing abuse, it's really important you let them lead on their timing. And you may, I mean, look, I think many of us, when we witness abuse, we get really fired up about it, right? That's terrible. It shouldn't be happening. And we may want to step in and take action for someone. And that can actually be really damaging and really harmful, and you could make them far less safe. So it's really important that when you take action, it is with their agreement and making sure you're not coercing them either, right? Like you're in a position of power. And so you have opportunities to influence them to agree to do something that they might not really want to. So it's really important that we let go of this idea that we have the best solution and meet our clients where they are, hear them out, and explore with them what makes sense for them and what is most going to be most helpful for them.
yeah, that's really powerful. And I think that's something, was going to be one of the questions that I mentioned is that, or as you mentioned, is to be careful about overstepping.
Yeah.
Is that, what would you say to advisors to make sure that they don't overstep and that they act appropriately within their scope?
Yeah. So, um, well, there's a couple aspects to overstepping, right? One is overstepping where you're moving faster than the client wants, or you're moving in a direction that the client doesn't want. That's really important. And we just talked about that a little bit, right? That can be how you can protect against that is give your client options. And you can ask them, like, hey, I know it might feel that you don't have any options right now. I see my job as helping you come up with options. If you want them, would you like some options? That's maybe the first thing. Do they even want it? Maybe they don't. Maybe right now they just want to be heard and a safe person they can trust to share this to. Maybe they do, and if they do want options, like okay, give them options. And which option would feel good for you? And even help them explore those options. It's really important that we're not in our like it is a thing then when we find ourselves trying to ride in on the white horse and save somebody, one, we can end up, excuse me, harming them. But two, we can end up recreating this dynamic of where we are actually now, we've kind of swapped places with the abuser. Like, no, this is the thing you need to do. You need to do this. You need to open this credit card in your name, right? You need, like, it's really important that we step back and recognize this person is the expert on their life, and their best chance of making this out safely and alive is they have the knowledge to do that best. Our job is to show up and support them where we can, but we really need to let them lead. So that's like how we avoid overstepping client and not harming the client. And then the other piece about staying within the scope of our expertise is I feel like that's a tricky question in a way, right? Because one, I'm sorry, let me drink some water. All this talking. Getting my throat tickly.
You're on the spot.
Yeah. So one thing that you can do to make sure you don't overstep is if you are working with folks who are experiencing financial abuse, realize it takes a really big toll on you. That's a huge emotional toll. So it's really important that you are getting the care and support that you need. That will help protect you from getting sucked in to doing more than you really should. Because and if you are noticing yourself feeling a pull to do something above and beyond what you would normally do for a financial planning client, really invite you to just pause, notice that, and check in with your support system, whether it's your coach, your therapist, whether it's a group, your mastermind group of advisors that you meet with, and give yourself some space. Because when we're feeling urgency, there's probably something going on underneath the surface, some dynamic that we might not be consciously aware of. And those are the things that can end up pulling us out of our scope into where we end up when these cautionary tales they tell at the CFP board ethics seminars.
Yeah. So, Joy, before we wrap up, there is one other question I think is super important is when should an advisor think about reaching out themselves to, either the police or
Mhm.
to an elder or to to an appropriate state
Mhm.
agency? When should an advisor think about taking action themselves?
Yeah. So every state has a mechanism set up to help folks with elder abuse. So if the victim is over 65, you can contact your state's county, you can Google it. There's going to be some agency focused on helping prevent elder abuse. You can contact them. You can talk about what you're seeing, and you can report it, and they can investigate. You can also ask them what resources you can offer the person. That system and network does not exist for adults under 65. And frankly, some involving law enforcement can actually make things more dangerous for someone. Like the stories, I mean, like I think of a situation where someone was physically harmed by their partner, and they called the law enforcement, and law enforcement went to arrest the person who had been harmed. And because they'd been so harmed, they couldn't move the way they normally would, and they stumbled and fell. And then they were charged with assaulting an officer because they like fell against the
No.
officer. Yeah. And now they had jail and they had court and they had all of this. And so engaging law enforcement is you only want to do that at the behest of your client, of the person who, right? This is where you want to talk with the person in a safe way. And remember, if you're having a private conversation on Zoom, you don't know who else is in the room behind the computer, right? Like, so ideally you can do this face to face, but I realize some of you are virtual. But you want to do this at the behest of your client, and you want to put them in the driver's seat, and you want to give them options and ask them, would that be helpful? Would that be helpful if I contacted law enforcement for you? They might say no. Believe them. If they tell no, believe them. If they say yes, then you can talk with them about what that might look like and how they'd like you to do that. And so to the extent that you can collaborate, great. If they're over 65, then there's a network that you can draw on. But if they're under 65, really, really work with the person directly.
Well, that's great advice. And for everybody watching and listening, I know this has been a heavy episode. So, hopefully you did learn some things where you can make a positive difference in someone's lives, because that's what we all want to do, is we all want to help other people at the end of the day. And sometimes helping people requires restraint and not
Yeah.
just jumping in.
Yeah.
Um, I had first response training, and I did a training with the fire department. And yeah, I wasn't a firefighter, but just happened to do some training with them. And that's one of the things they teach you is when you get to a scene, and everybody who's seen firemen arrive at a fire, notice that they don't just run straight into the fire,
Mm.
is that they sit there, they look at it, they talk, and then they make a plan of attack, um, to take care of it. But they never just jump right into a situation without fully understanding the situation and understanding the resources that
Right.
they can use. So I think we can apply those same things when we're thinking about this, is
Yeah.
understand what your resources are, understand what the situation is, and, do what you feel comfortable with. Um, and I think, I mean, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think the other thing I would add is I am also a resource. Look, there are not many CFPs out there who understand the therapy world, who understand domestic violence and the impacts it has, right? It's pretty unique that I'm at the middle of that Venn diagram. I'm a resource. On my website, I have a Calendly link that you can schedule a 15-minute consult. If you are concerned that you might be encountering a client where there might be abuse, please feel free to reach out to me and like we can have a conversation and I can help you figure out more specifically the resources that might make sense for you and that client. Um, also, yeah, so like, and there's, yeah, so I'll just share that we can have a more specific conversation. And I also have a group with advisors where we meet twice a month and we're talking about really tough client cases. So if you have a bunch of clients where you're wondering, I'm not sure, I don't know, like that might be something that if that's something you would find helpful, that you get to talk through client cases and you get perspective of somebody who's both a planner and a licensed therapist and has a lot of experience working with people in abusive situations. um, you'd be welcome to join us. And you can see information about all of that on my website, joyslabaugh.com.
Fantastic. And that, of course, is the wrap-up question, is where can people learn more about you and to connect with you?
Yeah, so joyslabaugh.com, and you spell Slabaugh, S as in Sam, L-A, B as in boy, A-U-G-H. Or like one family member, they created an acronym, smiles like a big, awful, ugly groundhog. That's how you spell Slabaugh.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm not going to forget.
Exactly.
So, and for everybody watching and listening, as always, there will be links to Joy's website and LinkedIn profile, um, but not to the full acronym on the website. So, so if you have access to the show notes, you can go there as always to find the links. Joy, thanks for coming back and to sharing your insights on the second part of this episode.
Thanks for having me, Tony. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you as always to everyone tuning in. If you learned something today to change the way you're thinking about money and how you're seeing these things with your clients, please be sure to share and to subscribe. You can also go to my website at tonystewart.com to receive my newsletter and to join the Get Ready movement. Because when life happens, the way we think about money matters.